This is a very interesting letter. It's from a businessman out in the Middle West, a layman who takes an active part in the work of his parish and who has a keen interest in the wider field of his church activity. In it, he asks a question which undoubtedly is in the minds of many of our people. He says, "I have always considered it my duty and privilege to support the work of the church, both financially and with my own personal efforts. But as a practical businessman, I like to know what results my contributions are accomplishing. It's encouraging to feel sure that the expenditure of time and money is worthwhile." That question cannot be answered adequately and satisfactorily by a mere letter or by the printed word. Perhaps I can help you to understand the problems not only by telling you, but also by showing you some of the situations we face and the steps we are taking to meet them. Millions of men, women, and children, deprived by war of all but life itself, look to our church for spiritual leadership, for Christian fellowship, and for inspiration and comfort of the gospel. If the church fail these millions in their time of greatest need, there is grave danger that Christianity itself will fall victim to war's aftermath. Conditions in Europe today, as you will presently see with your own eyes, are such that it is vital to nourish the souls of men if their lives are to be worth living. Although I had made 3 trips to Europe since the end of the war, it was in the peaceful city of Lund, Sweden, that I felt most strongly the urgency of our problem. I'd like you to go back with me to that time and place so that you may come to understand, as I did, the enormous responsibilities that rest upon us. I went to this lovely old Scandinavian city in the early summer of 1947 as one of a number of American delegates to a World Assembly of Lutheran churchmen. You will be glad to know that you helped to make this gathering possible through Lutheran World Action. Without our aid, most of the delegates would not have been able to undertake the hardships and expense of the long journey. Among those who registered as representatives from the Lutheran churches of 26 countries were many from lands devastated by war. That representatives from countries which fought each other bitterly could so soon after conflict come together and join hands in Christian brotherhood seemed a miracle wrought by God's Spirit. As the procession gathered before the communion service on the first day of the assembly, the international aspect of the meeting and of the Lutheran Church was strikingly illustrated. To this first post-war convocation of the largest Protestant church came men and women from Sweden, from Denmark, Norway, and Finland, from England, Holland, France, Austria, and Hungary, from Czechoslovakia, Poland, Italy, and from Germany came not only representatives of the German church, but also those of the churches of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in exile. Over the seas came men and women representing the churches from Iceland, Canada, and the United States, from British Guyana and the Argentine, from Madagascar and South Africa, from India, China, and from distant Australia. Here within the walls of an historic cathedral, the leaders of the World Lutheran Church joined ranks in Christian love, brushing aside the resentments and misunderstandings of the past to seek a renewal of faith, to examine the problems of the future, and to pledge themselves to united action in rebuilding the church the world over. One of the great purposes of the Lund Assembly was the formation of the Lutheran World Federation. A constitution was adopted and signed by the delegates. Officials were elected. Provisions were made for the appointment of national committees, and permanent working commissions were planned. A unity of faith and fellowship was quickly realized, which brought new confidence and a feeling of strength despite the enormous tasks which lay ahead. While many other important topics were discussed and studied in the business meetings of the Assembly, it soon became apparent that three pressing problems called for immediate action: those of the orphaned missions, of displaced persons, and of the rehabilitation of the church. The administration of the orphaned missions, established by German and Finnish societies, was discussed at one meeting by Dr. Franklin Clark Fry of the United States delegation.
Orphan missions, I need not remind you, are those that are still tragically cut off from the support of their mother societies here in Europe. In the exigencies of the war, it was obviously necessary for Americans to assume full care of those missions. Now, however, we American Lutherans earnestly propose that that responsibility be accepted by the total Lutheran World Federation. A further major desire of ours is to have this assembly call upon all of its enthusiastic member churches to declare their intention to form united Lutheran churches in what we have called, up to this time, the mission lands.
Ever since the beginning of Lutheran World Action in 1940, we have included aid to the orphaned missions in our budget. At first, the missions of Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Germany were all involved. However, mission societies in Norway and Denmark resumed complete support of their fields after the war. The Finnish fields, now being aided by Lutheran World Action, are located in Southwest Africa, China, and Japan. The German missions helped are in South Africa, Tanganyika, Palestine, India, China, and New Guinea. Since 1946, the Batak Church in Sumatra, Indonesia, founded by the Rhenish Society, has also been assisted by Lutheran World Action. From both the material and spiritual points of view, these orphaned missions are almost of incalculable value. Strategically located in fields ripe for the spread of Christianity, these establishments represent property values of $100 million. The impact of a century of Christianity in each area cannot be valued in money, nor can it be quickly regained if once lost. Some of the devices we have adopted to meet administrative problems in the distant mission lands would seem strange to earlier missionaries. The use of our China mission plane, the St. Paul, to transport supplies and personnel between widely separated bases has proven highly successful. This famous mission plane has helped a great deal to expedite our missionary work in the Far East. A typical example of orphaned missions is found in Palestine, where we have taken over the support of several projects founded by German mission societies. Here is a well-equipped institution in Jerusalem caring for scores of orphans. The provision of a Christian home for these children of the Holy Land is an outstanding achievement which appeals to every Christian heart. Our provision for the sick and blind is another great service of this mission. Every effort is made to rehabilitate the disabled in mind and body by teaching them the Word and by giving them practical instruction which will help them to become self-sustaining. A well-equipped trade school teaches a number of useful arts and crafts. Much skill and artistry goes into the making of pottery, producing designs which are both useful and extremely ornamental. Even more practical is instruction in the making and repairing of shoes, for the cobbler need never be idle for lack of customers. And the classes in printing and binding, taught with the aid of modern machinery, paid for by World Action funds, is of direct service to the church. This printing plant turns out quantities of religious publications much needed in our work. Finally, in Palestine, as in every one of our century-old mission fields, our support of orphaned missions is of supreme importance because it means that the cross shall continue to reap its harvest of souls in pagan lands. In a similar way, Lutheran World Action keeps the gospel alive and revitalizes the younger Lutheran churches on 3 continents. What other agencies would do this if we did not? The second great problem before the Lutheran World Federation is that of providing spiritual aid for the 180,000 Lutherans among the displaced persons who will probably never be able to return to their homelands. At the Lund conference, the plight of these unfortunate people was described by the Archbishop of the Latvian Evangelical Lutheran Church in exile, Dr. Theodor Grunbergs.
Kopš 1940. gada jūnija Latvija, Igaunija, Lietuva.
Since June 1940, said Bishop Grunbergs, the people of the 3 Baltic nations, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, have undergone indescribable privations and suffering. A great number, about 250,000 of them, have been scattered over foreign countries where they have lost hope in the darkness of their misery.
Mēs varam tikai cerēt uz Dievu, tur, kur mūsu ceļš ir via dolorosa.
Dr. Howard Hong is the representative in Germany and Austria of the U.S. National Committee of the Federation. His comments at Lund are based on his personal work among the displaced persons in these 2 countries.
Training camps for religious youth leaders and Sunday school teachers must be continued. Such kind of help is of great importance to these people because the existence of the church itself among these people is at stake. Even more important to them is that every gift, every act is a sign that they have not been forgotten by their own church.
In the many DP camps throughout Germany and Austria, Lutheran World Action has been a vital factor in providing the spiritual dynamic that only the church can offer. The physical needs of the DPs are the responsibility of the International Refugee Organization and other secular agencies. But these people look to us to supply the needs of the Spirit. In this camp, just outside Salzburg, for instance, 600 of the 900 inmates are Lutherans. Religious services held in a converted schoolroom are made possible by our aid to the pastor, who is himself a refugee from Latvia, and by our provision of Bibles and other religious supplies. A number of Christian youth camps are operated by the YMCA with the help of Lutheran World Action and the United States Army for the benefit of the younger generation of DPs. Our material contribution to these camps is the supplying of extra food, which makes it possible for thousands of these youngsters to spend a few weeks during the summer months in the regenerating atmosphere of the countryside. Their minds and hands, too, must be directed toward a future of hope and self-reliance. Here we can assist in organizing classes of vocational instruction and handicrafts. Most important of all is the provision for religious instruction and services, to lead these children of misfortune out of their bewilderment by showing them the way to God. I think you will agree, on the basis of the evidence you have already seen, that the task of Lutheran World Action is highly complex and of vast scope and importance. By now, you have probably a clearer concept and a keener appreciation of the unique services rendered only by the Church. When we planned the allocation of the $10 million World Action Fund for 1946 and 47, it seemed logical to accept the spiritual rehabilitation of our church and people in Europe as the special responsibility of our church in the United States and Canada. However, it was necessary to add material aid to our Lutheran World Action program, not to detract from, but to supplement spiritual relief. The two must pull together as a well-balanced team. For while it is true we cannot give spiritual relief to dead people, a dead church resulting from dead souls and the loss of Europe to atheism would be catastrophic. That we were right in our decision to provide material aid was proved by the testimony of church leaders at the Lund Assembly. Here is what Bishop Fedor Ruppelt of the Lutheran Church in Slovakia reported to us.
The child feeding program is one of the most important parts of your work. Shall I mention the clothing and the shows you have given us? Can you imagine what a winter coat may mean to a person who is almost naked?
It is certain that our child feeding program justified itself by keeping alive thousands of little children who were in immediate peril of starvation. This schoolroom in Vienna is typical of those in 7 countries where 85,000 children were fed one hot meal a day in a $600,000 program financed chiefly by Lutheran World Action with the aid of Canadian Lutheran World Relief and the Missouri Synod. Early in 1946, Lutheran World Relief appealed for clothing to Lutherans all over the nation, and within a few months, millions of pounds of shoes, clothing, and bedding were on their way to Europe. The Lutheran World Relief appeal was soon extended to include not only clothing, but also to meet the needs for medical supplies, food, sewing equipment, hand tools, and other self-help materials. Food, too, has been shipped by Lutheran World Relief in enormous quantities. Purchased in America and shipped abroad were such essentials as 95 tons of soya beans, enough to make 342,000 loaves of bread. One manufacturer alone donated 223,200 jars of infant food. Sometimes the medical value of your gifts is beyond our ability to measure. This little tubercular patient who lives in a Frankfurt bomb shelter thanks you for the first doll she has ever seen. In addition to the shipments of food, clothing, and medicine, the encouragement of self-help and vocational training towards self-sufficiency is an important phase of our work among these refugees. Tools and materials are provided to aid many such projects. And homemaking arts flourish among the women and girls when we supply such simple necessities as needles, thread, and cloth. 6 dozen community-sized shoe repair kits already distributed have made it possible to repair thousands of shoes and eventually will outfit cobblers in 72 villages. Tons of garden seeds and gardening tools from the United States and Canada have been eagerly put to work, adding fresh vegetables to the local food supply. Material aid, therefore, is an important part of Lutheran World Action. But as I stated a few moments ago, we are convinced that we have another and even more important job to do at the same time. Our task is that of strengthening the spiritual resources of Europe by getting the church back on its feet. This is the third great problem that faced the World Federation at Lund, but it is largely the problem of American and Canadian Lutherans because we are practically alone in being fortunate enough to have the resources to cope with it. Here, in scenes especially photographed for you, is what you would see if you could go with your dollars to the heart of post-war Europe. Aid to pastors. That means funds to support or to help support men like this overworked minister who lives just across the Russian border in Finland. He and his wife urgently need the few dollars that come to them each month from Lutheran World Action. The boat that takes them on their errands of mercy, like the clothes on their backs and the sacramental supplies required for weekly services, are essential to an effective ministry. In another part of Finland, a deaconess travels many miles through the forest every week to the widely scattered huts of her people. The bicycle she rides and the clothes she distributes are your gifts from the United States and Canada. In Marbach, Bavaria, is the church of a courageous country pastor who lost his right arm as a soldier in the Second World War. He too rides an American bicycle, the only means of transportation on his parish rounds. In Hanover, we find heroic Bishop Lilje, wartime enemy of the Nazis and now one of the busiest church officials in Europe. The office equipment and religious supplies which enable him to administer an enormous diocese must be supplied from our funds. And the automobile that permits him to travel from parish to parish is another gift from America. Aid to pastors and church leaders in Czechoslovakia is supervised by Dr. J. Igor Bella, who is our representative. More than 1,000 miles northward, we see Bishop Sormunen arriving in an American car bought with our funds to take part in a Thanksgiving service held during the visit of Pastor Jacob Heikkinen, the representative of Lutheran World Action. Strong leadership is everywhere vital to the reconstruction of the church, but we know that such leadership cannot be effectively exerted unless it is well equipped and mobile. Rebuilding the shattered churches of Europe is a task so far beyond our means that we shall never attempt it. But church buildings are of vital importance to serve for the preaching of the Word and the administration of the sacraments. Therefore, where the damage is not too severe and the cost of repair not too great, we feel justified in drawing upon our funds for reconstruction. But another answer must be sought where the cost of rebuilding would be prohibitive. An ingenious temporary solution was found by purchasing prefabricated military barracks and remodeling them into chapels. Shipped in from Sweden or Switzerland and erected at a total cost of about $5,000 each, these chapels accommodate 200 people for worship and serve as a center for community life. Where church buildings were completely destroyed, as was the case in this village near Vienna, the barracks chapel provides the starting point for the renewed life of a parish. At the dedication of this chapel, one of 23 provided by Lutheran World Action, every inch of the interior was crowded and more than 400 of the congregation stood outside for the service. Another valuable function of barracks chapels is to provide a place for Sunday school services for the instruction of children. A newer and more permanent solution to the problem of church housing is found in the Rubble Church, a standardized building accommodating about 400 people. The foundation and walls are built of stone and rubble, salvaged in many instances from the ruins of the church they are to replace. The prefabricated wooden frame and roof are shipped from abroad with additional materials and labor supplied locally. One of the most immediate problems of Lutheran World Action is the production and distribution of Bibles and other Christian literature. Great quantities of printed matter of all types required for services, for religious instruction, and for use in seminaries have been provided through your gifts. In filling this need, we have found it advisable to buy the raw materials whenever possible, since the printing and binding can be done more economically in Europe than elsewhere. This process also provides employment when it is most needed and results in the production of a maximum number of books at minimum cost. The famous Bible house at Stuttgart was almost entirely demolished by air raids, but it is once more turning out thousands of copies of the Gospels. Bibles from Stuttgart are shipped throughout Germany by railway and truck, and we have even succeeded in distributing 10,000 New Testaments in the Russian zone. Lutheran World Action has also made substantial contributions to the American and British and foreign Bible societies, whose excellent work we shall continue to support in the future. You can imagine how much it means to ill-equipped pastors to be able to distribute catechisms to the young people under their care and instruction. And it is surely a blessing to be able once more to sing together their beloved hymns in praise of God. But perhaps most important of all is the fact that we are able to provide Bibles and other essential literature for use in theological seminaries, where students are being prepared to take up the preaching of the gospel to future generations. Every phase of Christian education was tragically set back in the conflict areas of the war. In Vienna, the ruins of the celebrated Karlsplatz School, the foremost Lutheran school in Austria, illustrate the present condition of many of our finest seminaries. Commandeered by the Nazis and burned by them when they abandoned the city, Karlsplatz will be rebuilt with the aid of our funds so that it can again be of service to the church. The state of Christian education in the Lutheran Church of France was described at the Lund conference by the president of the Synodical Commission of Montbéliard, Monsieur Charles Delbruck.
We wanted to be certain to have at least one Lutheran school where, under the teaching of qualified masters, the name of God would not be ignored or purposely put aside, and where the Holy Gospel would be read and taught. We wish to have a school for the young boys, for which our church provides scholarship. We wish to have a preparation school for our college and seminary, and thus to have in the near future a sufficient number of young and active pastors. Actually, with the wonderful help our Lutheran brothers gave us from the state, the Institut de Gley was rebuilt nearly entirely and reopened its doors last October with a total of 115 boys. 10 of them are actually looking forward to studying for the ministry as soon as our studies in Gley are finished.
The results of our financial assistance are apparent from these scenes which were photographed at the Institut de Gley only a few months ago. Everywhere in Europe, the need for such facilities is great, for the ranks of our pastors were thinned by the war, and the training of new leaders is imperative. In many places where the buildings were not completely destroyed, theological studies continue despite hardships. The Lutheran Seminary at Bratislava, Czechoslovakia, is damp and cold, but its students are among the best it has ever had. Cold water for washing, with an occasional cake of soap sent from the outside world, is no deterrent to the courage and high spirits of these churchmen of tomorrow. Throughout Central Europe, there is a serious shortage of lay leadership. Our gifts help to relieve this condition. In the central part of Vienna, new barracks have been erected to house young women who are training here for nursing, visiting needy families, helping with parish work, and assisting deaconesses in their labors for the church. A former hotel in the Austrian capital has been rented by the church to assist Lutheran students at Vienna University. For a few shillings a month, a daily luncheon is provided, and to most students this means the difference between carrying on with their studies or giving up. One of our own Lutheran grammar schools in Austria serves as an example of an unusual solution to the problem, where we are able to furnish the supplies and equipment, the teachers, and the school itself. In some countries, religious instruction is forbidden in public schools, and it is necessary for the church to supply teachers and quarters for this purpose. Another educational activity of tremendous significance is the operation of Christian youth camps. At the Lund Convention, we heard the report of one of these workers, Mrs. Julius Bodensee.
If Germany is to survive and to become a fit place in which to live, we must help German youth to find its way back to God. We must keep these young people from becoming the victims of hopelessness and despair.
Institutions of mercy and service are essential to the rehabilitation of the church in Europe. Yet, now that they are most needed, these ministering centers of the church are least able to respond. The cost of completely restoring them is beyond our immediate resources, but we have been able to achieve remarkable progress. In Vienna, our funds are making possible a new project, the conversion of a war-shattered hotel into a home for orphans and students. In Slovakia, according to the testimony of Dr. Schmidt, founder of the Bratislava Deaconess Home, our aid has kept alive 150 sisters whose lives are dedicated to the church. The home also houses a Lutheran hospital, a dormitory for girls of high school age, and rooms for pensioned pastors and their wives, or for pastors' widows. At the railway station in Munich is one of a number of Lutheran missions which offer shelter for the night to destitute travelers. The accommodations are pathetically meager, but there is always a full house by 8 o'clock, as these unfortunates seek refuge from the cold, darkness, and misery outside. In many of our institutions, self-help and the making of useful products are supported by the funds of Lutheran World Action. At Bethel Institute in Bielefeld, the making of artificial arms and legs for war casualties was made possible by our gift of $20,000. In the heart of Munich, our gifts are repairing a foundling home which has a dramatic history. During the intensive air raids of 1945, the home was bombed and wrecked, but all of the 66 babies were saved through the vigilance and heroism of the sisters who had taken them to the basement for shelter. That we have been able, with your aid and with the help of God, to do so much already for our brethren in a war-shattered world is a source of great and heartfelt joy. My thanks to you for your support of Lutheran World Action can only be a thin echo of the voices of millions to whom you have brought renewed faith, revived hope, and even life itself. Listen to the words of some of the gallant leaders of our church in Europe as they speak for their own people.
It is a great privilege to express the hearty thanks of the Lutheran Church in Slovakia, Czechoslovak Republic, for the great help you have given us and you are still giving us.
As all this work had been impossible for us without foreign help. We hope indeed very much that we very soon could join the nations which are helping and are active in this relief work. But now we are only grateful for that help we have received. I cannot but say, may God himself bless you all, your homes and your children, from generation to generation.
The help of the Lutheran World Federation had already been a great blessing to the churches under the cross. Lives have been saved and destroyed church institutions restored. The years of war cut us off from other Christians for a long time. We are very much obliged to the help recently received and may ask for further assistance in the future.
Wir sind den Christen der Welt sehr dankbar, dass sie uns Notkirchen geschenkt haben. Es ist ja ein sehr hartes Gericht, von dem viele in Deutschland betroffen sind, dass ihnen die Wohnungen genommen sind. Aber viel schlimmer ist das Gericht, wenn einem Gottes Haus genommen wird. Deshalb ist es das größte Geschenk, wenn einem ein Gotteshaus wiedergeschenkt wird. Und das hat Gott durch die Christen der Welt getan.
Kościół cierpi z powodu braku sił, brak mu duchownych, brak mu diakonis. Chodzi o pomoc wydatną dla duchownych.
We are very thankful for all the help the American Lutherans has given us, and we pray the Lord that he may bless you all.
There is little to add. The evidence of physical suffering and spiritual need has been placed before your eyes. You have witnessed the church in action, responding to distress. You have seen your gifts being distributed. You have seen your money at work. You have heard from the lips of your brethren themselves concerning the blessings wrought through Lutheran World Action, which has distributed more than $17 million in 7 years. The person you did not see in this picture is yourself. Yet you were there, an unseen figure in every part of it. Your church thanks you. Our tasks seem overwhelming until we remember that the God we serve multiplies our small powers. At the Lund Assembly, our World Lutheran Church mobilized to continue the struggle against evil and suffering. Every one of us must join in that onward march of faith. The battle is not yet won, nor will the cost of victory be cheap. God expects further sacrifices that His church may rise up in new strength. For some, that sacrifice means continued hunger, suffering, persecution. For us in America, it means giving. With our gifts go our loving prayers that God will hasten the day when voices will glorify Him and sing His praises in a world healed of its wounds and blessed with His peace.